our host for this evening, the District Governor of Rotary District 7020, Mr. Charles Seeley. Charles, take it away.
Thank you so much, Laura. And so a pleasant good afternoon to each and every one of you. I bring greetings, and this is the one time where I'm actually three people. So I actually want to bring greetings on behalf of District 7020, 7030, and 7000. District Governor Lyle, District Governor Mercedes, and I, we have gone beyond just being district governors. We're actually family. We're the Flamingo family, and you'll hear more about that at another time. But I bring greetings, and because of our president reminding us that Rotary opens opportunities, this is absolutely one of those moments. It's one where partnership like this, where we consolidate, where we come together, that we show the power of our brand. It's also one of those times where we, in understanding that, you know, but 2 years ago I used to say, we are this close. We can now say, we are this close. We're getting closer and closer every day and every moment. And that's because of the hard work and the efforts of Rotarians, persons like yourself in front of us, along with our partners around the world, really not in any way retarding, not slowing down, and keeping fervent. And so I just want to again also say a special good day to each of you. We're growing, the numbers are climbing, so more and more persons are coming into session, and I believe this is going to be a fruitful one for you. It is in that Rotary opens opportunities that we realize that even in doing good, in ridding the world of polio, that we saw the plus, that we saw the other opportunities that presented themselves as a result of this. As a matter of fact, one of the opportunities from this is that we now have to educate those in the Western world about polio. We've done such a fantastic job that our kids don't know what polio is. And that's the world we're trying to get to, where the world is free of polio. But what other benefits can we bring in these moments? And that's what we're gonna hear about tonight. We're gonna talk about tonight and really enliven you of the many opportunities that spawn from this wonderful journey in polio eradication. But our world, as you all know, is facing yet another calamity. We've got a pandemic that is seeking to devour us in many, many parts of the world. And all of us have seen a new norm. No matter where you are in the world, life is different. I always remind my team that, you know, in January when you were doing your resolutions, I don't think anywhere on it said COVID-19. And so we have come to realize that here is something else that could be a threat to humanity. And as Rotarians, what do? We step up, we show up. And today we talk a little bit about those synergistic relationships of COVID and of course, polio. But I'm not the veteran who knows this subject at hand. We've brought in experts who could speak to this. And so it is my pleasure now to take us on the journey of information, where I now introduce our keynote speaker. Fellow Rotarians, ladies and gentlemen, Carol Pandak is the Director of Rotary International's PolioPlus program. She directs all aspects of Rotary's polio eradication program, including administration, advocacy, communications, and financial oversight. She also manages the fundraising support, grants management, and member engagement. She's got a lot of things under her portfolio. She's a staff liaison to Rotary's International PolioPlus Committee and works closely with the partners in the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, including, of course, WHO, UNICEF, US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Gavi, of course, the Vaccine Alliance. Carol also serves on multiple cross-agency committees and management groups of course, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and is Rotary's representative to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative Strategy Committee. Her work has taken her all over the world, where she has monitored polio immunization campaigns, addressed Rotaries and partner activities at the country level, and participated in high-level technical and stakeholder meetings. I feel comfortable and I am confident that she's best served to serve us tonight with this informational topic. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please welcome with me our speaker for the night, Carol Pandak.
Thank you very much, District Governor Seeley, for that introduction. And thank you all. It's wonderful to be with you this evening. I sort of wish I was where you are, or where most of you are in the Caribbean. I'm from my home in Chicago, just outside of Rotary International headquarters. So what I'd like to do today is provide you with an update on the status of PolioPlus within the context of COVID. I have a short presentation that I'd like to share with you, so I'm going to share my screen. I've been getting a lot of questions recently about what is happening with our PolioPlus program within the context of COVID. So I hope to answer some of those questions that you might have this evening as I go through my presentation. So just as a reminder, as District Governor Seeley just said, Rotary is a founding member of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. And actually the Global Polio Eradication Initiative was formed in 1988, which was 3 years after Rotary launched its PolioPlus program. By 1988, we had raised $247 million to support polio immunization activities. This is when the World Health Assembly adopted the resolution to eradicate polio based on Rotary's fundraising capacity and huge legion of volunteers that could go out into communities and immunize children and advocate for polio eradication. Our original partners were the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation joined the Global Polio Eradication Initiative in 2007 when they made their first challenge grant to Rotary of $100 million. Since that time, the Gates Foundation has granted to Rotary in matching funds $985 million. Just extraordinary partnership. And in 2019, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, also joined the partnership. We also work with governments of the world, both donor governments such as the US, the UK, Germany, etc., that also provide important funding to polio eradication in addition to Rotary and the Gates Foundation. And I have a fan of my presentation in the background, I hear. And also with polio-affected governments who we work with to ensure that Rotary or polio remains a priority with them. So Rotary's main role in the Polio Eradication Initiative is fundraising, and to date, we have contributed over $2.1 billion to the global effort to eradicate polio, including matching funds from the Gates Foundation. We've advocated with governments, as I mentioned before, to ensure that polio remains a global priority. We've worked to raise awareness in communities, in the public, about the importance of polio eradication. And of course, members around the world have individually participated in all different ways in our global effort to eradicate polio. So I'm going to now talk about the infrastructure of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative and how it's supporting the COVID-19 response. So one major part of that infrastructure is the frontline healthcare workers, or are the frontline healthcare workers. And this involves hundreds of thousands of frontline healthcare workers. So for example, in Pakistan, during their most recent National Immunization Day, there were 270,000 vaccinators that spread out across the country. They do this multiple times per year, looking for every child under the age of 5 to immunize them against polio. Now, in between the polio immunization campaigns, hundreds of thousands of community mobilizers are out in the community teaching parents about the importance of vaccination against polio and other vaccine preventable diseases and providing broader healthcare messages. And this is just to keep up a presence in the community of local health workers so that parents have go-to people to answer their questions about health. To support these hundreds of thousands of frontline healthcare workers, there are tens of thousands of medical officers, and these are the technical professionals, the epidemiologists, that provide the guidance for the program at the country level. So on the other I guess, side of the coin, I'd say, is the Global Polio Laboratory Network. And this is 146 laboratories spread out around the world that work to detect any possible virus in a person or even in the environment, as the polio virus can live for a very short period of time in sewage. So these laboratories test samples of specimens that are taken from people who have symptoms of polio. And I'm sorry.
Good night, Dee. Good night.
I wonder if people could mute their phone if they're not, or mute their microphones if they're not talking.
Oh, hi, Andy. Oh, honey.
Okay.
Hey, yes, I
So there are 146,000 laboratories across multiple countries, and these are testing samples of stool samples taken from children who are exhibiting symptoms of polio. This requires thousands of frontline medical officers that go out looking for cases of polio, and also thousands of laboratory technicians to test the samples that are brought to the laboratories. This is important because the techniques that are used in the Global Polio Laboratory Network that are looking for potential cases of polio, the same systems are used to identify potential cases of COVID. At the same contact tracing techniques, meaning that if there's a child who exhibits symptoms of polio and there is a positive identification, then children around that positive case will be tested to determine if they have polio and how much it's spreading in the community. And the same system is being used for COVID. So this system has brought us much progress in polio eradication. In 1988, there were 350,000 cases of polio every year in 125 countries. That's 1,000 children a day being paralyzed or even dying from polio. In 2020, there are 129 wild polio cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And as noted in the video earlier, you will note that there are no red countries in Africa, because we reached a significant milestone on 25 August, whereby the entire African region was certified wild polio virus free after Nigeria had not detected a wild polio virus since September of 2016. Now, this infrastructure has brought extraordinary benefits, and I think the largest benefit is that 19 million people who otherwise would have been paralyzed are walking because of Rotary's and our partners' polio eradication efforts. Almost 3 billion children have received the polio vaccine, and just last year, 430 million children in up to 40 countries were immunized against polio, because as long as the polio virus circulates anywhere in the world, all children are at risk. And as I said, we've had 4 years of no wild polio virus outside of Pakistan and Afghanistan, with the last case in Nigeria in 2016. So this is sort of what COVID looks like today. Every country very similar to what we saw in the map on polio. Oh. My slides are stuck. Oh boy. Screen sharing. Sorry, my slides are stuck. Okay, so how is this polio eradication infrastructure working to combat COVID? When the World Health Organization declared polio or declared COVID a public health emergency of international concern at the end of January, it was agreed that the infrastructure that was working to fight polio would work to respond to COVID. So what does that mean? That means that those hundreds of thousands of frontline healthcare workers that are working on polio are now working to educate communities on how to protect themselves from COVID. We are helping to coordinate the outbreak response for COVID, especially in countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan that have emergency operation centers established for polio. Those are now working to combat COVID. The surveillance medical officers that I mentioned earlier are also investigating cases of COVID as well as polio. The epidemiologists are training healthcare workers, and the same mechanisms to trace contacts for polio are being used to do contact tracing for COVID. Now, here are a few examples, some more concrete examples of how this infrastructure is supporting the COVID-19 response, and it's truly the plus in PolioPlus. I talked about the laboratory network testing for polio and COVID. In Pakistan, a call center that has been established to take calls from parents and communities about polio are now answering questions about COVID. Community mobilizers are educating communities on COVID, and logistics officers that were responsible for ensuring that the polio vaccine got to every corner of all the countries in which we work are now working to deploy personal protection equipment. And your fellow Rotarians are also helping to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic in the polio affected and high risk countries. So for example, in Pakistan, where we provide vaccine carriers through our Rotary National PolioPlus Committee, those vaccine carriers are being used to transport COVID specimens. In Pakistan also, where we partner with multiple small non-governmental organizations, those small NGOs are being used to respond to COVID and being used as testing sites for COVID. Your fellow Rotarians are providing food to needy families in Pakistan and Nigeria, providing personal protection equipment. In Nigeria, they're providing it with the End Polio Now logo. And in India, where Rotary had established what we called an ulema committee, or a committee of traditional religious leaders who spoke positive messages to the community about the importance of polio immunization, they are now talking with communities about how to protect themselves from COVID. So in March 24th, actually, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative took the very difficult decision that in order to protect communities and frontline healthcare workers, that polio immunization campaigns would need to be paused for a temporary period of time. This happened in March, and then in July, campaigns resumed. And they resumed ensuring that the frontline healthcare workers and communities could be safe by providing personal protection equipment to the vaccinators and the community mobilizers. So Pakistan and Afghanistan were the first two countries to resume activities. Pakistan has carried out now one full national immunization day, whereby 40 million children were immunized against polio. They have another one scheduled for October, November, and December. Afghanistan has carried out 2 campaigns so far and have more scheduled for the rest of the year. Also in Africa, as I said, because all children are at risk until the polio virus is completely eradicated, activities are resuming, have resumed in 8 countries, and 12 more countries across Africa and Asia will be resuming activities shortly. So very soon, we will be back to full force immunizing children. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like immunizing up to 400 million children every year against polio. It means funding all of those frontline healthcare workers I've been talking about this evening. And it means increasing our disease surveillance capacity, both looking for the disease in children and in the environment so that we can be sure we know where the virus is circulating. So we can be very proud as Rotary and as Rotary members that the infrastructure that you have built has helped respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The infrastructure for polio really was the first responder to COVID. But it's also been utilized to respond to Ebola in Nigeria, SARS, and yellow fever, along with other diseases. And what many people don't know is that, like COVID, polio eradication, or polio, is also a public health emergency of international concern, given its devastating impact on children. In fact, it was a public health emergency prior to COVID. Rotary's advocacy efforts with donor governments will continue, and with the polio-affected governments will continue. We need to raise more funds to help end polio, and we need to ensure that Pakistan and Afghanistan prioritize polio eradication so that we can finish the job. Rotarians need to continue to raise funds to meet our $50 million fundraising goal that is matched 2-to-1 by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and that goes through 2023. We successfully raised a little bit over $50 million last year, and I'm confident that we'll do the same again this year. And finally, we need to convince parents everywhere and community leaders to vaccinate their children against polio, such that we can soon achieve a polio-free world. So World Polio Day is the perfect time to recognize the progress that we've made, to rally support from the public, from communities, from political leaders and their members, in order to continue to support the global effort to eradicate polio, such that we will be successful very soon. And that ends my presentation. I'm confident that together with District 7000, 7020, 7030, we will end polio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And we managed to get the presentation in at least three languages. We were back and forth, so it was a truly international experience, which is exactly what polio is all about. We do have a question, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions from Rotarian Virginia in Suriname, and she is asking, how has the Plus affected available resources with COVID-19 being added to the polio program? How did the organization handle the increased need for human resources and funds? And then secondary to that, has the Plus somehow halted the polio work? So perhaps you could address that, Carol.
Sure. So polio work, the only polio work that was halted were campaigns for a short period of time, from that March 24th timeframe to maybe mid-July. And some campaigns are still resuming. But while the campaigns were temporarily suspended, other essential functions for polio eradication, such as surveillance, continued unabated during this period of time. We also made sure that the vaccine that would be needed to resume campaigns was appropriately positioned wherever it needed to be, so that activities could resume very strongly as soon as possible. And routine immunization, that is the immunization that happens in clinics outside of the campaign structure, much of that also continued. So we saw a lot of polio eradication work continue even during the COVID response.
Okay, wonderful. And Rita has a question. Rita's from the ABC Islands, which is actually a question that I was thinking as well. How is our program dealing with parents in the developed world who have the opinion that vaccination is bad for their children? And we have a lot of anti-vax movements, so
it's not helpful. I can tell you that. You know, the program works really hard, actually in the countries such as Pakistan and Afghanistan, to use the community influencers that those communities listen to most in order to encourage parents to have their children vaccinated. And so the program is working less, I'd say, with the anti-vax movement outside of these countries, but working very hard with those in the countries that are still endemic for polio, especially to find those within the community that have the influence to talk with communities, and if there are issues, try to resolve them such that children can be immunized against polio.
Yes, I know it's really very much a fight almost against social media in many cases. And Vincent has a question, sort of follow up onto that, which is we've seen a lot of social media about Bill Gates, where he's almost presented as the Antichrist. And of course, we know, we all Rotarians know the impact that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has had on our work against polio. But is Rotary doing anything to combat that negative messaging about Bill Gates and anti-vaccine movement?
No, to be honest, our experience to date, and I know exactly what is being referred to, is it's very difficult to make statements that against the conspiracy theorists that actually can make a difference. So we do have a statement whereby we support the Gates Foundation and point people to an organization called PolitiFact that does fact checking on a lot of conspiracy theories, and share that with people and say, okay, here's what PolitiFact, is saying about that theory, which completely debunks it. So we do share that when we get questions at headquarters. But other than that, going out with a public statement, we feel it's better sometimes to be under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes you get drawn into these online conflicts that don't go anywhere. Lindsay asked a question, is the GPEI, which you may have to explain to folks, continuing to develop vaccine enhancements?
Yes, so the GPEI is working on a new polio vaccine, a new oral polio vaccine, that is more stable than the current vaccine. That it can withstand heat better, and there's also some very interesting technology that's being looked at. For example, a nano patch for a polio vaccine, whereby you would not have to, or you could just put the patch on somebody's arm, and that would provide the immunity or the vaccination that's needed to create immunity. So the program is always innovating to see how to better increase immunity as quickly as possible.
So one of the challenges that we have in the Caribbean, and I think perhaps many second world, third world countries, is encouraging our members to give to polio when we have so many problems locally and we don't have polio anymore. Certainly Trinidad and Tobago, we have vaccinations, we don't have polio. And sometimes it's a hard sell when you don't have something in your backyard to get people to give to the PolioPlus. And of course with COVID now, everybody's saying, okay, well, we're going to give to COVID and not to polio. So I wondered perhaps if you had any advice for the clubs that are here today, especially those in the smaller islands, the less developed countries. How do we message to our members and other donors and partners to keep giving to polio and to give to COVID? And really, what are some tips or hints for members who really struggle? I think some clubs struggle to get their members to give to polio. Sometimes even, 100 US a year, 25 US a year is a struggle for some members.
Yeah, and this is interesting. This is talked about quite a bit with the Rotary leadership that's working on fundraising for polio. We do all sorts of analyses, but what we saw was last year, I think 52% of clubs contributed to polio. And that seems, if it is our top organizational priority, that may seem low to some people. I think what I would say is, it is not the amount of the contribution. It is just that a contribution is made. This is an historic opportunity to eradicate only the second human disease in history, and to really, embrace the full Rotary experience. And Rotary has made polio eradication its top priority. I think every Rotary member should want to participate in that. So it's not the amount. Any amount is fine, but just to participate and be a part of this moment in Rotary's history, I think would be incredibly important as a member of our organization.
Yes, I often tell people it's mandatory. When you join Rotary, this is just something you have to do. It's really not an option. Past President Raj Jadu, who's in our district, one of the sort of leading lights in the fight against polio, is asking a question. Gets asked, why must I help eradicate polio when my country is polio free? What is the best response? So kind of follow up to what I was just asking. Yes, it's part of our global mission. Yes, this is what it means to be a Rotarian. But if we're going outside the Rotary family, what are some of the messaging for non-Rotarians, perhaps, to help support what we're doing?
Well, these are good questions. I think we have to remember, polio was endemic in 125 countries when the World Health Assembly adopted the resolution to eradicate polio. At that time, so many countries and Rotary members themselves, many Rotary members lived in countries that were affected by polio. So you could relate more to it. I understand that. But I think that, just as maybe we are a victim of our own progress, but we haven't reached our goal. And those children in Pakistan and Afghanistan deserve to be, free from polio, just as the children in all the other countries that are now free from polio. So I think we have a moral obligation and responsibility to ensure that those children are treated as equitably as all the other children who have benefited from our PolioPlus program.
Thank you. And I also think that the movement of migrants, the massive movement of people that we've seen in the last few years from what I've been reading, has also jeopardized some of the polio-free situations in some countries. So I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit, because this is not over till it's over. And it could very easily come back to our part of the world, just a plane ride away.
Yeah, I just saw that in the chat box, right? That's excellent as well. Of course, there's so much movement, cross-border movement. And we've seen in the past how the polio virus can travel, for example, from India to Angola, from Pakistan to Iran, Pakistan to China. So there is really no, it does not need a visa to travel. It travels easier than any human being. And so, ensuring Pakistan and Afghanistan achieve polio-free status ensures that the world sustains its polio-free status.
Absolutely. And of course, we're not allowed to travel, but polio can. Do we have any more questions? I think that might be it. I hope everybody's getting through with the language. We did have a few hiccups, I think, with some of the translation, people accessing it. So, okay, if there are no more questions, I'm going to invite our End Polio Now coordinator for Caribbean, the whole of the Caribbean, Past Assistant Governor Lindsay, just to bring us to a close.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Carol, for that very informative discussion. We've learned about the history of how we got into this in 1985, and then the formation of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which is what GPEI stands for, in 1988. How we've gone from 350,000 cases in 125 countries back then to 129 today in only 2, and have successfully eradicated it from the continent of Africa, which is, after India, got to be a massive accomplishment. The infrastructure of the PolioPlus mechanism that we've created with our partners has brought about not only this success, but is being used to combat COVID, as you've heard. And I would, like to add that maybe that's another reason why you should advocate for continued support of the PolioPlus effort. What we do with polio is being used to help with the containment of other diseases. Therefore, as long as we continue to fund it, we will be able to deal with Ebola, SARS, and COVID, and God knows what's coming around the corner. So that's another reason in my mind to not stop giving to the PolioPlus initiative. And We've also heard how we went through the cessation of immunizations as a result of COVID, but they've now resumed in the 2 endemic countries with fervor. And we are very close to meeting our goal of eradicating this from the face of the earth. We need to keep giving because we've got 400 million immunizations to do every year. And so we ask all of our members in the 3 districts, this unique initiative that we've come up with this year for the 3 districts to get together, and I hope is not the last, have this discussion, but also to commemorate World Polio Day on Saturday, October the 24th. And as you hopefully will have seen in your various emails, we are doing a presentation at 10 a.m. Eastern online with all of the districts, the 3 districts participating. Please sign in and watch it. And while you're doing that, if you've got some spare change, give to the initiative. We will have a World's Greatest Meal online that you can contribute to. I know some of you don't know what that is, but you'll find out shortly. And just think about it. If only 20% of our membership in the 3 districts gave $10 on Saturday, that would end up with $10,000 going to the fund. And the Bill and Melinda Gates would match that 2 to 1. That's 30,000. That's 50,000 children we could immunize just by giving $10,000. So it's very important. So thank you so much, Carol, for speaking to us tonight and leading this terrific discussion. We really appreciate it, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. And yes, Carol, thank you so much to you and your dog for joining us this evening.
I don't know, it wasn't my dog, but it was some dog.
Somebody's dog. No, this whole Zoom experience we've seen inside people's homes, their kitchens, their families. It's been quite a wonderful way to get to know each other a little bit better. So just a couple of reminders to you all that the recording for tonight's session is going to be on the Rotary District 7030's YouTube channel. And I see that some of the links are being shared now on the chat. And as PDG Felix has shared with us, that until polio is completely eradicated, it remains a threat to every single country. So we really are in this fight together. We're on this mission together. And yes, COVID is here and COVID will be with us for a little while, but we really do need to get to the end goal for polio. And we're so grateful to Carol and to Lindsay and to Charles and to all of our technical people behind the scenes, Patty and Roger and our translators. Truly, I mean, you know, I often say to people, I'd never heard of Zoom in March. And by April, we're all suddenly Zoom professionals and experts. They should really give out certificates. So I want to thank all of you for sharing an hour or so with us this evening on this very important topic. A reminder that Saturday is World Polio Day, so make sure your club is doing something. Give a little something, spread the news, share the information, especially with new Rotarians who may not know what we're doing to end polio. And my thanks to all of you, particularly to Paddy and the technical team, DG Lyle. DG Lyle, can I ask you to close us off with a final word, as I see you are sitting there, hoping to avoid having to say anything, but as you're there, let's have our closing word from our district governor.
Thank you, Laura. This is like a great surprise. But Rotarians, guests, family, it's so fantastic to see 186 of you online here tonight. And it represents all of us in District 7,000, 7020, my brother Charles, 7030, Harish, Lindsay, and Carol, thank you. That was such an informative presentation. I trust that all of us are going to make our contributions before the end of the night to end polio now. And that, remember when the guy taught us about speaking publicly, he said you have to end with a hook. That's it, guys. That's my hook. Let's do it. Thanks a lot. Good night,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.